Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I'm your host for today's show, Rockin Robbie Billups. Super excited to have a very talented and individual here on the channel tonight. But before we get into that, I got to give a major shout out to Dynamite Entertainment, who helped put these shows together. They've been supporting our channel for over 3 years now, and they've got a Vampirella Humble Bundle that is available right now. I'm going to throw a link in the chat in case you're here in the chat. There is already a link in the description below, but it is a plethora of Vampirella comics for as little as $1, as much as you want. I'll read the official copy here. Uncover a macabre library featuring one of horror's most enduring comic book heroines in our latest bundle from Dynamite. Unearth classic Vampirella tales and discover modern interpretations in volumes like Vampirella, Hollywood Horror, and the Vampirella Master Series, featuring stories from some of comics' most celebrated writers, including Grant Morrison, Mark Miller, Kate Leth, and more. Plus, your purchase helps support the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. So, y'all, you get a lot of Vampirella comics for as little as $1 or as much as you want to spend. You help support a really solid cause. So, go check out that link. I highly recommend it. All right. Dynamite has hooked us up with a writer of one of their upcoming projects, a couple of their upcoming projects, including the Powerpuff Girls Supervillian Summer Spectacular. Love the name of that. I love the alliteration. That's super cool. Also, the upcoming Stitch comic book series, which is kind of perfectly timed because the Lilo and Stitch live action adaptation comes out this week. But this dude who we're about to talk to is much more than a Powerpuff Girls comic book writer. He is known for co-creating the Astronomy Club, right? He's also known as a writer for Good Burger 2 and recently wrote on The Fairly Odd Parents, A New Wish. I'm on the Upright Citizens Brigade website right now. He's got television appearances on Abbott Elementary, I Think You Should Leave, a Black Lady sketch show, and he even played Cat Stevens on Human Resources. He also co-hosts the podcast Tiny Dinos and Black Men Can't Jump. Let's bring him in, everybody. James the Third. How you doing, my man?
Hello, I'm well. Thank you for that intro. I appreciate you letting everybody know these credits that they've certainly never heard of.
Oh, whatever.
The Tiny Dinos podcast. What is it?
You're a super busy dude, man. You're a podcaster, you're a writer, you're a producer, you're an actor, you're a comedian, you're a comic book creator.
Yes.
Well, thank you for finding the time to be here, first of all. So that's awesome.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I didn't know about that, about the Vampirella book and it's supporting the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Oh, that's great. I have to get it.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, like,
you sold me. I had no idea that was going on.
Those humble bundles are always so cool, you know, like they help support a cause and you get a lot of great digital comic book content. And if you just want to throw $1, ain't nobody throwing no shade at you. You know what I'm saying? Ain't nobody being like,
no, absolutely.
Right? Nobody knows. It's not public. It's not public how much you support. You know, you could be like, I gave them $250. Meanwhile, you could just be like $1.
Yes, I mean, I would question why you feel the need to say that you gave 250 when you gave one. I would sort of, think about that, but give whatever you can give, and then you get what you can get in return. So
yeah, my latest social media post, I just gave $200,000 to this. No kid, James. This is the first time we've met, and I was looking up who you are, and I'm rather impressed with your output. I'm interested because I've heard of the Astronomy Club, and unfortunately, great. I haven't had the time to check any out this week. I wanted to, because it's on Netflix, right?
It's on Netflix, yeah. For as long as they're gonna keep us on there, because you never know with how they shuffle around content, but we're there. We're on Netflix.
Heck yeah! So look, I just want to know what's your origin story? How did you get involved in comedy and sketch comedy and writing? Like, what brought you to that?
Yeah, the long story, as short as I can get it, is I've always been into it. I did it in school, in young school, did like comedy and improv, and then And then when I went to college, I ended up in New York because I wanted to be somewhere where I could like study at a place like a Second City. At the time, there was I think Second City is now back. So the way I used to tell this story is there's no Second City anymore, blah, blah, blah. But now there is, it's back now. And it's been a number of years since. But so I went there so that I could do theater and comedy and, you know, all of these different kind of things that I was interested in. But it wasn't really until I started doing comedy proper that I started writing, which was maybe 10, 15 years ago now. I was at the UCB Theater in New York, and I studied there. I took all the classes there. Astronomy Club, the Team Astronomy Club formed there. And it was a lot of the work that I did with them that led to paid writing through like, you know, like different websites. Comedy Central's website was I don't know if they're still doing stuff like this, but you know, would pay to do videos here and there. And then the transition into writing professionally, and also kind of my transition into comics kind of happened at around the same time. Like I've always been a fan of like superheroes and stuff, and I had a few comics growing up, but I wasn't a heavy collector then. But when I got my first writing job, it was for Adam Ruins Everything. It was out. I'm in Burbank, California. It was out here in Los Angeles, and I was like working, and so and had nothing really to do. I didn't know anyone out here other than the people that I worked with. So I would like go to the comic book shop every week, and so the you know, I was doing a lot of work in comedy, but I have a lot of interest in genre and like superheroes and you know, kind of my personal comics are horror comics. And so I started producing my own comics to sort of try to build a body of work that would show that I actually have a voice in this space, you know, rather than being only seen as a comedian or what have you. So that's the long story as short as I can get it is that.
Okay. Well, how did you, what was your first big break? What would you say your first big break was?
Wow, that's a great question. You know, I really don't. I mean, it would have to be Astronomy Club or something like that. I mean, the CBS Diversity Showcase is what brought me out to California, and being out here is what kind of propelled me into my first like writing. The Adam Ruins Everything job came from being out here and getting to work with. I had already known some of the producers that were out here doing that, but I ended up doing a pilot that they did before Adam Ruins Everything ended, and like that kind of volleyed into me submitting a packet for that show. But I would say that like, you know, there's nothing bigger, I think, break wise than like getting to co-EP star and write in your own show. And so, you know, for as much as like Astronomy Club is kind of like the fans know it, you know, but it is sort of for the most part a kind of hidden thing. But there's nothing quite bigger than that in terms of like a break. I've had a lot of like great jobs since that I always point to, and like getting to write on Good Burger 2. I'm not the main writer of that, but getting to write on that was, you know, was huge, and all that led to working on all that reboot led to that. You know, but in terms of like, because I don't have like the flashy credits, I think in terms of big break, like Astronomy Club was a truly an amazing experience, and so far has been a somewhat singular experience. I've gotten to develop some things post that, but like, you know, getting it to air and what that does for you in terms of visibility is really great.
It's got to be a hard road to climb, right?
Yeah.
Like it really
Yeah.
does, because it just seems like there's so many people that want to be doing that stuff, and
Mhm.
so few people get the opportunity. And then here's a question. So yeah, you worked on like Punch Up on Good Burger 2.
Mhm.
You wound up working on the All That revival. Were you a fan of All That back in the day?
Huge fan. And you know what? I interviewed for All That twice. So they had a 13 episode order originally, and I interviewed for the first one for the original thing, and it didn't quite go over well. Like I didn't book it then, and I think because the only thing I was kind of offering was how big of a fan I was. You know, like the
Yeah.
interview was kind of like me just being like, "Oh, I love Ear Boy," you know, or whatever. But uh and then during the time that they wrote that show and was producing that, all of Astronomy Club happened. So for my second interview, it was like, I've now written 100 sketches for television, like it was like this thing that like shifted in that, like, and so I became like a more viable candidate for the job, because it was like, instead of just being a fan who also wrote sketch comedy and performed live sketch comedy, it was like, oh, now, now you're someone who actually writes TV. But a huge fan, and that ended up being it still ended up being a big part of my role in the room for that, and I think a big part of why they brought me on for Good Burger 2, because I already just kind of had like a real, not encyclopedic, but like a really in-depth knowledge of the show, and like would remember just like they would ask me like, did we ever do something like this, and I kind of had a lot of that already ready to go, and love this, and have such an affinity for them. I always say that when people ask me about me as an actor, I always say I went to the Keenan and Kel School of Acting, and it's still very much ingrained in me. Like, it's a kind of too big, like kind of a little too not normal as a performer, type stuff. But I truly loved it, and so it was a dream come true to get to work on all that, and then Good Burger 2. I mean, I had been dreaming of what a Good Burger 2 would be like since 96 or whenever that movie came out, so that was incredible to get to do.
I'm always curious about this, and I know that you've worked in some writers' rooms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always curious, what's that process like? Because like, to me, I imagine like a bunch of people together, just like having fun, throwing ideas out there, figuring it out, a big whiteboard, like maybe like Post-it notes with string across the entire room or something like that. But what's that process like? And that's like, you're in the writer's room for a long time before you see anything on screen, right?
I mean, you were pretty much spot on, except for maybe the string, except for maybe the string element. But that's a lot of what it is, especially in the early days. It's a lot of kind of just talking, before you actually get anything really written down. And that's really great, and every writer's room is different. I've heard that for some writers, you're on a room and all you're doing is kind of pitching, and you're never quite putting something. When I was on Human Resources, my official title was consultant. I was in a couple days a week, and I was just pitching, jokes for that. And they had their main writers kind of working, who would go off and then write scripts. But the typical process is like a lot of kind of ideation. You are putting things up on the board and seeing what sticks, and then kind of eventually, as you are narrowing things down, a writer or two will take a script, work on it while other things are kind of being developed, bring that script back. There's a table read, and then maybe a couple table reads. In animation, what's great is that there's so many different steps where you're kind of seeing visualizations of it. So there's like a couple table reads, and then there's a couple different storyboard periods, and then you're just hearing the radio play, like just the audio. So there's all kinds of stages and steps that make, and there's all these different opportunities for collaboration, because the writers are all doing what we're doing, and one writer will bring a script, and then we're all kind of punching that up. But then the storyboard artists and animation directors and stuff are also putting in their input. And then when it goes to record, actors are sometimes improvising. And so then it's like there's even more elements being added to it. And so by the time you see, like, Fairly Odd Parents took 2 years before I saw any completed animation, and because I was only a staff writer on that. And so when I saw the show, when it actually came out, it was like just amazing to see these kind of completed, fully completed things that had like all of these different elements that are even, surprises to me. So yeah, it's a long process, but generally pretty fun. I haven't had any major issues.
Awesome. We keep talking about the punch up of a script, and Dee wants to know what's a punch up? Is that related to a pilot? Do you want to explain what the writer's job is on a punch up?
Absolutely. So a punch up is essentially, you can think about it in terms of like a single joke. So like I'm gonna do a very bad example off the top of my head, but it's like so like say that a joke is like this guy slips on a banana peel, but then a punch up is like he has coffee in his hands when he does it, is just adding an element to it to make it stronger. Or even the slip on the banana peel doesn't work. That's played out. Let's have him walk into a car. Whatever. Sometimes the jokes fully.
Let's slip on a banana peel into walking into a car.
Into traffic.
That's comedy.
Yeah. And then he slips down a hill into there's a volcano and lava. So that's what essentially what punch up work is like you're there to kind of make something not feel there's times and sometimes things are heavily punched up that like you'll watch it and it'll feel like it didn't have a second pass, or it didn't have someone didn't go back in and write more onto it, but it's just to make something feel more fleshed out. It's why you do it to kind of get the strongest work possible. And punch up can relate to, it doesn't just relate to, punch up is the term for how you make something funnier. You're punching it up, but rewrites and things, it also has to do with making something feel more dramatic or feel more emotional, or making sure that the story really matches. All of those kind of revision stages happen in all forms of writing.
Yeah, and like a big, people that are writing a script or something like that, they get really, because I've written scripts, right? And you get really attached to certain things, and sometimes you need another eye to come in there and to be like, bruh, this bit is not working. We need to maybe do this or whatever. Like, there's the famous saying, like, kill your darlings, right? And people say that all the time, and it's hard for somebody who's been there from the beginning to do that, right? So So what was the process like punching up the script for, say, Good Burger 2?
Yeah, Good Burger was great. We my work in the room was maybe about a month total, from like reading and like developing my own, kind of coming in with my own pitches to actually being in a room. I was in a room with the other two writers, Kevin and Heath, Kevin Coppola and Heath Seifert. They were the original writers of the first film, and were writers on all that, and were my head writers on the reboot of all that. And also Kevin Coppola specifically, if you know the show, is Kevin the stage manager. He's that that character. 5 minutes. That guy has been writing for this content for that.
I like it when creative put themselves into the product, like Vince McMahon when he became Mr. McMahon in wrestling or whatever, right?
And I think he would tell you that he never meant for that to be what it became. I think he would say like he never thought that he was going to be like as involved as he was, and was less involved as Kevin the stage manager in the reboot. But he, it's always great to see him when he pops up. And Heath also pops up sometimes too, and not as recognizable because not in as many things. But if we were watching, I'd point them out to you. But and so it was great. I Good Burger, truthfully, means a lot to me on a way that like is hard for me to explain. And so like I came in with like heavy rewrite ideas, and there was a point in the process where I was asked like, do you want to do your own pass versus like, or do you want to just get in a room with the guy, and I was like, I'll get in a room with the guys, that's fine, and part of me, for what the ideas were, part of me is like, these ideas would have had more life had I presented them with a script with them in it versus a pitch of them. But that being said, it was about a week of us in the room, and then I think we did the table read the next week after that, and it was just a great, like, every day we kind of would go page by page and just try to plus jokes and they were and stories about the previous film. They were like, we must have shot the number of jokes and things that like get shot for a movie like this that like don't even make it into it, are so many. But by the end of that week, I think we had done 2 passes of it, and you know, and some of my work makes it on screen, and you know, and I ended up voicing the burgers. There's like a few burgers in the movie, and so I'm one of those people. And so it was great when we did the table read. It also it came to life even more, you know, from the read that we were doing together, because you know it was Keenan and Kel, and then a handful of actors that were just reading parts. And we did it in the room where they did the original their original table read like 25 years prior or whatever, and like
Oh,
I'm
wow.
losing my mind. You know, but it just really came to life with them there. They it was their first time reading it together. You know, they had also read and given their feedback, but it was their first time reading together, and it just really came to life. Those characters were like riding a bike for them, and so it was really an amazing experience. I mean, I don't know how many, if that was as detailed as it could have been, but
Oh, that was
but
perfect.
it was a great process. It was really, really, really fun to get to work on.
That was perfect. So me and my friends, you know, we grew up watching Saturday Night Live, Kids in the
Mhm.
Hall, The State, the Upright Citizens Brigade. We're
Yeah.
like, we're really in every one of me and my friends. We're like, I got this idea for a sketch. We could do like a sketch thing, right? And me and my friends, we come up with one idea every 6 months. Man, what's it
Mhm.
like having to like? Is that pressure to have to come up with
Yeah.
this like multiple sketches within a
I
month?
truly wish I were better at it, frankly. If I'm being totally honest, I think I would have a different career if I were faster, but and less precious. The first thing I'll say is, like, one of my first jobs in New York, like paid comedy jobs in New York, was I did a number of sketches for Late Night with Seth Meyers. And the first one and just kind of like background, I think I maybe had a line or two every now and again, but the first one I did, John Lutz was the writer of that one, and John Lutz, 30 Rock, and other credits that I can't think of, but great writer, very, very funny comedian. And he came in, and I was just blown away by how quick it would be. Like, there was a script, and he would just be like, "But what about that?" And then somebody else might pitch something. Great, that's the funnier one, and he would just immediately absorb it and have that be a part of it. But to also be as quick to be like, this isn't to recognize that something isn't landing at the level that you want it to be, and to be as to just be like, it needs to be something else, and then knowing what that other thing is, you know. It's really great. It's really great. It's a good pressure, I would say. You know, there is pressure, but it's a good pressure, because I truly think, just off of my experience, that it is necessary to kind of be in a place of like not being super precious about there obviously there's some things to where, you know, you're like, the meaning of it is this, like, oh, I can't cut this because it literally is what it's about or whatever. But maybe you might need to ask your question as to, why are you getting the note that you're getting? What's underneath that note? How can it be stronger? Because people are reacting to it, you know. But it's a good pressure, because you know, things that are funny today are not funny tomorrow, or not, or but then it might come around, you know. So it's sort of, a lot of it is, there's evergreen and there is topical, but a lot of it is like, it's here and then it's gone in an instant. So being able to be like that as a writer, I think, is strong, and makes you stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more you work, especially when you work with people that you think are really good at it, you learn a lot from
Hmm.
them. I'm
Yeah,
certain, right? So
absolutely.
you mentioned horror is something you really love. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'm a huge horror movie fan. I'm just curious, what are the horror movies you love? What are your like Mount Rushmore of horror movies?
Yeah, so I did sort of plateau in the 90s. I do have to be honest about that. I have not quite evolved post, like I saw Saw for the original Saw for the first time a couple of years ago. Like I think I saw Spiral before I saw the first Saw. If that,
Oh wow! I bet when you watched Spiral, you were like, "What the hell's going on in this movie?"
No, I had seen like Saw 4. I had randomly seen Saw 4, and I was like, I don't know if this is. I was just posting on social media that I get like a lot of anxiety around a lot of them now, and particularly like Final Destination, for instance. I'm excited for this new one that's out, but like I tried to have a marathon a few years ago because I realized I hadn't seen any past 2, and I got up to 3, watched all of 3, loved it, love it, but was like, I certainly can't watch the next one. This will kill me. Like it's the anxiety is so, it's just really but I love the supernatural. I love feeling I like the feeling of uneasy. I like the feeling of like I recently watched Hellraiser for the first time, and I love the idea that like behind a door is hell. Like I love that. Like just like this wall, there's a weird thing at the end of that wall. I that really excites me. And I think that
it makes you rethink every time you pick up a Rubik's Cube, right? You're like, no, I don't want to solve this thing.
Oh, guess I better not open this box, but yeah, and so to answer your question about the Mount Rushmore, though, I mean, so it often goes back to like, for me, I do that first Final Destination is fantastic. But I think my favorite is Scream. Scream's my favorite.
Nice.
And I love all of those. Like I'm not as big of a fan of the newer one, but but I love the Scream franchise. And then that first Final Destination I think is truly fantastic. Get Out is up there. And I mean, and then just for the sake of I got to put respect on Coog's name. The Sinners is truly fantastic.
I still haven't seen Sinners, man. Last week I went to the theater. Last week I went to the theater and I was like, it's either Sinners or Thunderbolts. And I know my audience wants to know my thoughts on Thunderbolts, so I guess I'll watch Thunderbolts. But I've been anticipating Sinners forever, man.
Yeah, I had the same. It was the same thing for me because one of my podcasts reviews movies and talks about race in Hollywood, and so it was like I had to watch Sinners, and I'm glad I watched it, but I haven't seen Thunderbolts yet, and like there was a point where I was like, we could maybe do like maybe we just watch Thunderbolt, And,
we should have each done double features, right?
Yeah,
Thunder
honestly.
Sinners.
Yeah. The Sinner Bolts.
The Sinner Bolts. I like that better. That's a good idea. That's a punch up, everybody.
Yeah, right. Or in alts, frankly, I think both work. Both work. But yeah, and I really had a blast with that one. And I'm sure there are more, but those are the ones that like most. And oh my God, Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah, I know Mount Rushmore is only 5, but Nightmare on Elm Street, I think a lot of a lot of my comics, but particularly the horror ones, like I'll lean into like, oh, what are they dreaming? What does this make them imagine? What kind of horrible image can they be subjected to? And I think a lot of that is born out of just my affinity for that character and just what those movies can do. Like I think every so often I which one? I think it's in Dream Masters, but what the Wizard King or whatever.
Dream Warriors, yeah.
Dream Warriors. When
he's like, I'm a wizard.
It's just it's so sad. You know what I mean? Like it's so sad when you really think about what's happening, because it's like his deepest dream is to be able to have this power and this ability, and Freddy gives him that before disemboweling him, or whatever it is. It's so tragic, and I truly love it. I'm the morbidity of that, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm going on tangents, but like my favorite episode of Black Mirror for by a mile is Playtest, and in that one, it's the one where Wyatt Russell like wants to infiltrate a tech company, and he gets connected to a machine, and he's supposed to turn off his phone, but he doesn't do that because he wants to take pictures of the whatever it is that he was trying to do while he was there. And the instant he gets plugged into the thing, he gets a call, and that turns off. It kills him. But the entire episode is like what happens in his mind in the couple seconds that he dies, and it's like this horrible nightmare imagery, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse until you realize, oh no, this man died immediately. He died the second he put the thing on, you know. I just love that. I love it.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned Get Out, right? In particular, because like when you talk about like Keenan and Kel, right? Did I get that right? Keenan, okay.
Yeah, Keenan and Kel.
I always think about Key and Peele, right? I'm like, two amazing people that are doing sketch comedy. And then Jordan Peele comes in to be the new Wes Craven, the new John Carpenter, or the first Jordan Peele, I should actually say. Like, Get Out is an amazing movie. And I was a fan of Key and Peele. Like, I still quote lines from that show every day. You know, like every day I look at someone and go, "Noise," you know, you know what I'm saying? And, or the Shining parody where he's like eating the continental breakfast, right? And he's like, "I'm incontinent," and all that kind of stuff. But to see like a comedy, what some people, Jordan Peele, somebody could just look at him and be like, "Oh, he's a comedy sketch writer, whatever." Yeah. He's done these amazing horror films. Get Out, Us, which I think is brilliant. I don't think a lot of people understand Us, right? Yeah. And Nope is a very interesting movie, and I'm always excited for what he's coming. What do you think that there's a thin line between comedy and horror? Because I do believe that horror needs comedy and comedy needs horror, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of, and I was also talking to somebody about this about burlesque, frankly, but it was this comedian who was like, I don't like it when I'm gonna say this story first and then respond to the thing that you said, but she was like, I don't like it when it's like where women have to she was talking about like having to sell your body or having to, or like or even resulting to that as a way to get clicks and stuff. And I was like, well, if you think about like what a striptease is, and you think about like telling a joke, or like what a joke is, you know, there's the anticipation, and then either the reveal or the denial of that creates the laughter, you know. And so there's a connection there. And I think the same with horror, you know, there's something is coming, and the anticipation of that, and the kind of the thrill and the suspense. And then bang, the punchline, the horror element, the jump scare, you know, and so I definitely think that there's a lot of the DNA of those things are similar, and I also just think in general, like in all of these cases too, kind of the examination of the human condition that happens in both of those, and what the storytelling ultimately means. You know, everybody wants to laugh. Everybody wants to be scared. Even the people that don't, that claim they don't want either thing, you know?
Yeah.
So definitely.
All right. Well, let me ask you this. Okay. You said you had a few comics growing up. You got into them a little bit later. How did you fully get into comics? And what was the moment where you said, I want to make my own comics?
Yeah. Well, so I will say that, like, as a kid, I did like draw. I drew, you know, comics and things. And I like remember putting together, I've never spoken about specifically this out loud, but my friend Farron Anderson is her name. She's still with us, but, and I thought she was so cool, and I was like, we're gonna go on adventures. And I drew I drew like these little adventure, the Adventures of James and Farron is what it was called. The first comic I ever wrote. But what started my journey back into comics was I mean, I think first and foremost, I have to acknowledge the explosion of comics in Hollywood, and what that meant for the career path that I was already on. And also just in general, absolutely loving everything that I was seeing coming out of Marvel and all of the DC shows specifically, more so than the films. But and so, like I was saying, I got that job at Adam Ruins Everything. I was right around the corner from Golden Apple out here in Los Angeles. And so I would walk there usually every Wednesday, but sometimes, I might get there on a different day. And this was shortly after. Oh, no, it was actually during. It was during Tom King's run of Batman. And
Okay.
And the wedding was brewing, and I had just gotten married. Okay. And reading
Congratulations.
Batman, thank you. But reading Batman, this character that I known for so long, and Catwoman, and hearing them like making the guest list and stuff, and just a lot of things clicked for me. Like I suddenly started to understand why fandom gets so frustrated when something is not like the comics, because what happens in comics, and also what happens in your mind when you're reading comics, is so much more personal than when you watch a film, because I do think to a degree you are part of the creative team when you're reading, because you're making the connections between the panels, and you're hearing the voices, and so that's just real. That's just a reality that I think we just need to understand, like as creators, I think. And then just kind of seeing what was happening on the page, and how and how it just is so dynamic and so visceral, and the stories are so rich that that it really just kind of put a lot of things in perspective for me. But I was having this really strong affinity for particularly that run because of the personal connection that I was having with it. And then I was grabbing other books and stuff too. I now have, my collection is entirely too big. I have barely scratched the surface of what's even behind me,
Well, a true comic book fan, then. We have more than we can consume.
Yeah. But that's what really started it. And up until the industry slowed down, my pull list was really huge. But now I'm reading what I can when I can.
Heck yeah. Well, you've done work in some of the Archie horror stuff, which I think is, I love that Archie is doing that, because it gives some of these, I don't know, I would say legendary characters. I mean, Archie and Jughead, Betty and Veronica, but some of these other characters like Reggie, maybe people don't know as much about him. And I got a friend, Joe Corallo, who's done a lot of work in the Archie horror stuff. And it's interesting to see these wholesome characters be portrayed in such a different light. So I'm curious, how did this Powerpuff Girls special start? Do you have a history with Powerpuff Girls, and what's it like working with Dynamite?
Yeah, so the Stitch book is how it started. That had been in development for a while.
So Stitch was first.
Yeah, so Stitch was first, because we were
You
working
gotta
on the
have
whole
Disney involved, right?
You gotta have Disney involved, and also it's the series of it all. Like you want to get a lot kind of in the can before you're even getting things on the shelf, because you want to have it ready for when it's supposed to be ready. And so we were working on that. My one of my comedy partners, Connor Ratliff, and I are the writers of that. And Nate, the editor who reached out to us about that, I already had this history of writing on my own. So in addition to writing this thing with Connor, I was like, let me just reach out to Nate and see, if there's anything else that I can pitch on, and kind of get something going. And he told me what titles he was working on. And I had a handful of different ideas, but Powerpuff specifically, am a huge I remember the original What a Cartoon short when it aired. I remember watching it and then going to school the next day and like reenacting the entire thing with a buddy of mine. And I don't know if you've seen these videos, but recently there's this video that's been going viral of it's Craig is it Craig McCracken or yeah, it's Craig, right? Who did anyway, they're interviewing the original Powerpuff creator. And they're talking about how they're talking about how like boys really didn't like Powerpuff Girls. And I was like, what? I was like, hold on, excuse me? Boys did what kind of revisionist history is this? And then I like go on Wikipedia and see that like it wasn't a hit with boys originally. But I truly like we were like it's the first one was Meet Fuzzy Lupkins, and he gets the meat gun and is like turning everybody into meat. And Bubbles they mess up Bubbles' hair, and she's like, "I'm gonna kill you!" And she like mollywops Fuzzy Lumpkin, you know. And it was just like, I loved it. I truly thought it was incredible. So then when the show happened, I was a big fan of the show, and so when I got the opportunity to pitch on it, I was really thrilled about it, and I had a bunch of ideas. I sent them a ton of ideas. I think this one that is the book that I ended up doing, I think was like my second or third pitch. And I really wanted to make sure that it felt like a Powerpuff Girls. I read all of their books that they put out and rewatched. I will say most of the original series while I was watching. Like I think I got up through season 5. Well, I had watched some of the new because I hadn't watched the 2016 or 2018, whichever year that came out, reboot. I watched some of that too, and just really wanted it to feel like it's of that IP, and like and hopefully successfully will fit right in with everything else.
Yeah, my history with it was I remember when Powerpuff Girls first came out, but at that time I'm like a teenager and I'm like way too cool for school, man. Like I don't care about Cartoon Network or anything like that. And then like maybe 10, 12 years ago, my girlfriend at the time, we were trying to find another show to watch, right? And she goes, I want to watch Powerpuff Girls. And I was like, you know what? I'll watch it with you. Bro, I got hooked in.
Yeah.
That show is so clever, so funny. It plays with superhero tropes in the genre so well. And they get it done in these punchy, like 10-minute episodes, almost in a way, right? And it just, it never stops. And I was fascinated with that show. And the Dynamite comics have been extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
So they've been so good. Whether it's Kelly Thompson or Paulina Ganichow, all the people that have worked on that book have really nailed the look and the feel and the vibe of Powerpuff Girls. So I'm curious, this is the Supervillain Summer Spectacular.
That's
right.
I
think one of the best things about the Powerpuff Girls is their rogues gallery. Him, Mojo Jojo, like I'm so what's the boy group called? They're like the
Rowdy Rough.
The Rowdy Rough Boys. Yeah. Like I love all of that stuff. So is this centric on the villains in particular?
Yeah, so essentially, so me too. I love the rogues gallery of villains, and I think that's what makes the show. I mean, that's a part of what makes the show so special. And so I got this idea that like, okay, what if, and it had to be summer themed because it was the summer one shot. And so it's like, okay, well, what if, in Townsville, there's got to be some kind of an amusement park. Like, what if all the villains are there? And I just started with that. Like, what would happen if all of the villains were at the amusement park? And like, what is the line? Like, are they allowed to be there? Like, can they just be having fun? Like, or does it have to be that they're there doing up to no good, And so that was the premise that I wanted to explore with this, and populating it with as many villains as I possibly could was the goal. And so I got like I got a directive on who I could not have in it. And so there's there might be people that you're like, oh, where's but it's as many as I could squeeze in, like, and obscure ones too. so I tried to get
Nice.
as many folks in as I could possibly do.
All right, tell us about the Stitch book, right? Because Dynamite just wrapped up a Lilo and Stitch book.
Yeah.
And also this weekend, the Lilo and Stitch live action adaptation releases, which I think will be one of, if not the biggest movie of the year. I think
Yeah,
$1 billion easy on this. Lilo and Stitch, the original animated feature, is such an amazing movie. I think there's a lot of ground to cover there. So did you feel a pressure knowing the release schedule was so tied into that? Like what's the deal with that?
I was so pumped that it was going to come out around the same time as the movie. Like, just, I couldn't believe it. I kept saying to Connor, my writing partner, that, like, I can't believe this is going to come out after the movie, because I just would keep texting him that. But yeah, working on Stitch was fantastic. My Connor specifically loves Stitch, like like loves it. And when this opportunity came to us, I knew that he would be pumped about it, but I hadn't seen the original movie until we got approached to do this. And when I tell you, I watched it and thought, this is the most absurd premise for a movie I have ever. Disney was like, yeah, a murder alien, a murder alien befriends a child. I couldn't believe what I was watching. And then learns his place in existence, and to love and all of that stuff. But it's just so funny, all of the different things that it kind of has going for, it's Frankenstein, it's all of the, it's all of these kind of things together. And so yeah, getting to work on it was great. Connor and I we developed a handful of different. It was going back to the table a lot, like, oh, here's our first set of pitches. Okay, you liked 2. Okay, here's 15 more, and so it was a lot of that until we landed on a lot of kooky, weird, and zany are all of the adjectives that I will use, concepts. And the art is looking great. It's early for us still in terms of the art of it all. We're turning in a 6th script shortly. I'm need to move faster, but shortly. But we just got the first act. We broke them up into acts like TV shows. I don't know if that's how other people write comics, but that's what we did. And we got the first act, and it was reading it was really amazing. It looks so great. The art really pops, and the lettering has such great character to it. I really hope that kids like it, and if adults are reading it with I think it's an all ages comic essentially. And so if anybody, if older folks are picking it up, it should be fun. There should be something for everybody. We tried to write something that we liked and that we would enjoy. And so, hopefully, people of all, if you're reading it to your kids, or if you're just like, I like the Stitch movie, I want to see what this comic is, by all means, pick it up.
Heck yeah, I love the Lilo and Stitch stuff. It's so much fun, and I love the murder alien befriending a young girl.
It's just so funny that that's what it is.
Yeah,
that is right? What it is. He's not that. He's born to be this. He was made to be this indestructible, evil thing, and that's we latched onto that. We have Jumba and Pleakley Jumba developing evil, new evil experiments each issue, and then Stitch does something to kind of ruin that, and it spirals out of control. But the fact that Stitch was was first just this evil thing that that was just trying to survive, and then becomes a dog thing. It's just it's so funny when you just think about what the ingredients of Lilo and Stitch are. And you know, and it became the huge franchise that it is.
You know, in comics, I think it's very important because I'm a retailer as well, right? And I think it's very important to have comics that young kids can get into. I think it's very important to have all ages books. And Marvel and DC, they got their attempts at doing this in the recent years. But like, you know, I got into comics when I was 5 years old, right? Yeah. And I've been captivated ever since. And I think what Dynamite is doing with these Disney licenses, these Warner Brother properties, I think that it's very important to make comics that are all ages, right? Where what that means is, because at my shop, people go, "Oh, that's the kids section." I go, "Do not call that the kids section.
Yeah,
call that the all ages section, because there's no reason why a 30-year-old man, 40-year-old dude can't go in there, or a 40-year-old woman can go in there and buy a Sonic the Hedgehog comic and love it, or a Mario book and love it, right? All ages to me is so important to these comics. When you're writing this, you and your partner, did y'all have a conversation about like, how do you handle that? Like, we need to write something for adults, but at the same time, not talk down to kids, right? Because that's important.
I mean, you know, I've been writing kids TV for a number of years now, and Connor and I didn't so much sit down and talk about like what the line was so much as we thought like, well, let's make something that we like. You know, we really wanted to make something that would be special to us. And so we know that Disney's going to tell us what the line is, or Dynamite, which is the first line of defense before it gets to Disney. They're going to tell us where the line is. But ultimately what we're never going, or I should say, anytime any one of us thought, is that too far, the other person went, put it in, because they will tell us. You know what I mean? There's no point in us doing it. You know, when you're working with networks and studios and editors and stuff, it's their job to kind of to tell you what's going to work and what's not going to work. So for us to do that before they even get the chance to do it is like, well, why water down your thing if it doesn't even need to be watered down, you know? Or watered down has a negative connotation, but I truly don't mean that. I look at this as a collaborative relationship, and I'm not one to be like the network or whatever, you know.
They told me to do it.
They did that. You know, I just truly don't like. I don't know. I can't speak to all demographics. They're the one that they get that stuff. You know.
Yeah.
They're the ones looking at that data. So who am I to say? You know, I will put what I want in and potentially fight or respond to a note if I disagree, but I'm not one to be like, you know, you're an idiot for telling me that or whatever, you know.
One of my favorite movies when I was a kid was The Monster Squad, right?
Oh yeah.
And I remember having a cousin who I was watching The Monster Squad on HBO or something. It was one of those weekends where HBO was free, you know, back when they used to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And my cousin went and screamed at my mom, "Robbie's watching this really scary movie." She comes into the room, looks at it. By the way, my mom let me watch any Freddy movie, any Jason movie, any Michael movie. And she looks at it and she goes, "Oh, this is fine. Robbie's fine. Don't worry about it." Right. And I hated when I was a kid, I could tell when something was written down to me.
Yeah.
I didn't know those terms, but I could tell that it was like, this is stupid. Like this isn't what I want. You know, every kid wants to feel like an adult until you become an adult. Then you're like, I don't want to be a kid again.
Yeah. Right? and I'll also say a lot of times, 9 times out of 10, you know, the people, your Disneys, your Nickelodeons, you know, understand that that's what their audience is looking to do. And so when a show is for a certain age, it's often written for just slightly above, for that exact reason. So, and yeah, and kids know, they can tell. You can tell. Kids are
Yeah.
savvy like that.
Yeah, kids are smarter than us, except for they just don't understand all the nuances of existence yet,
Exactly. That's
right?
the only difference. The only difference is you have experienced a couple more things.
Yes.
but they're still perceiving, they're perceiving what you're perceiving. They just, you just have a different understanding of it.
Absolutely. Well, what's next? And I know you worked on a book called Junior that I really need to
Yes.
check out now, because the more I hear about it, the more I'm down. So what's next for you, James?
Yeah, issue 3 of Junior. I really wish I was getting these out faster, but issue 3 of Junior will be out sometime this year. I'm aiming for October. It's a double issue, but I might get 20 pages or so out this year before the back half of it. And Junior is it's a supernatural dark comedy, and it basically follows, like, what if your dead dad who you didn't know in life was a deadbeat dad in the afterlife. And I'm James the Third. It is me kind of working out some stuff for me, but set in like a kind of Tim Burton-esque afterlife. I had written a handful of different things about this story, sort of exploring my relationship to my dad. And I was watching Beetlejuice, and it hit me that I had been doing it wrong. And so that's where this kind of comes from. I love this book and getting to work on it. I'll have a Kickstarter coming soon for a not safe for work book that I'm doing, but it's an action sci-fi kind of comedy. And I'll be posting about that on my social media soon. So,
Well, heck yeah, man. It looks like the future is bright for you, bruh.
as
Really
bright
is.
as it can be.
Well, now that, I feel like now you're a friend of the show. I like talking to you. This has been a very natural, organic conversation.
Yes.
And anytime you have anything to plug or promote, whether it's a Kickstarter, a new book, or a new whatever, you let me know. I'll plug it. If you want to come on, you're always welcome. Bruh, I really liked this conversation. And
yeah,
I got to check out some Junior, man. I really do, because that sounds right up my alley, dude.
Yeah, please.
It feels like the serious version of Bill Cosby's Ghost Dad. In a way.
Well, let me tell you, it's not the serious version of it, but when I was developing my Atlanta, gritty, edgy version of this, I was loosely calling it Ghost Dad for a while.
Oh,
because
nice.
I thought that was fun. I thought that was a funny kind of play on that.
My buddy runs he still has a video rental store in my town, right? He just started a few years ago, and he's been a buddy of mine for like 25 years. And we were over there, and there's a bunch of us that gather there every Thursday, and sometimes we wind up just talking about movies. We wound up on Bill Cosby this last week, and we were like, "Do you remember Ghost Dad? Do you remember Leonard number 6 or number 9 or whatever the hell?"
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
And I was like, "Oh my god, dude! I forgot back the times before the fall of Bill Cosby, right?"
Truly,
where, yeah. And there's so much stuff there to mine, and man, I love movies. Movies, James, are like my first favorite love. Comics are probably second, because I was watching movies before I was reading comics, but I was reading comics like 5 to 6. But anyway, Junior sounds great. Really excited to check it out. You're always welcome back, James. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
You out there in the chat, go check out Stitch. Go check out the Powerpuff Girls Supervillain Summer Spectacular. Go check out all of the work from James the Third. I'm going to be watching the Astronomy Club for the next 2 weeks. So leave me alone, everybody, because that's what I'm going to be focusing on. James, you're a super cool dude, man. I really appreciate the conversation, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Of course. All right, y'all. We're dipping out. Station